What's up, Nashville? This is Beau with the Free Speech Podcast. As always, we are going to bring you the top stories of the past 2 weeks in the fields of Nashville commercial real estate, business, sometimes a little bit of culture, politics, and sports. As always, we are brought to you by Beechwood Commercial Real Estate Brokerage, the best brokers. If you are trying to sell your commercial property for the absolute highest price the market will pay, that is all we do, list and sell commercial properties in Nashville in the Southeast. Let's get into the show. I'm going to give you a quick overview of all the stories we're about to cover, and then we'll get into it. Number one, suburban office space is making a comeback. I'll catch you up to date there. Massive new development downtown starts construction. What is an indoor slide park? A new business concept coming to Middle Tennessee that I would bet you've never heard of. Huge sublease to a co-working center. So a tenant subleases their space to a co-working center who is then going to sublease that space to another business. Very unusual, but a promising transaction for the downtown core, who is kind of having a difficult time the last couple years. A new honky tonk is underway on Lower Broadway. I'll catch you up on that. A Pytown Tower is downsized. And this is kind of on trend for a lot of the stories we've been sharing with you lately. Many of these developers that bought into some of this high-priced land over the last few years have either decided to not move forward with those projects and flip that land, or substantially downsize those projects in order to get the capital, the financing, to get those projects out of the ground. I'll walk you through that deal. Rivergate Mall is being redeveloped, and many of those plans have now been released and are being supported by Metro and Mayor Freddie O'Connell. What is Nateland, which is a goofy name for what might turn out to be a very significant development in Nashville? A $46 million loss on a Midtown apartment tower transaction. Very high profile seller, a seller that knows only how to lose money for all of his investors. Somehow he comes out ahead, but everyone that invests with him loses money. I'll walk you through who that is. Christie's Cookies Germantown location to be redeveloped. Christie's Cookies exiting Middle Tennessee. I'll let you know what they have planned and also what's planned for their former site in Germantown. And lastly, one of the fastest growing towns in the entire country is located in Middle Tennessee, and I'm going to tell you what town that is. It is not Nashville, but it is a very high profile town that is growing rapidly, a town that my family frequents very often because that's where my daughter dances. So, let's get into these stories. First, suburban office space is making a comeback. Williamson County, where I work, live, and play, Williamson County has long been known as a suburban headquarters hub, but the area has seen higher vacancy rates than normal in recent years. That's true. Did you know that Cool Springs office vacancy rate is surprisingly high, around 20%? Nashville as a whole has started to see more looks from out-of-town tenants in the first quarter of 2025, and Cool Springs is a big beneficiary of the resurgence in activity. Cool Springs has a substantial amount of larger user interest. So that's the perfect scenario, right? If you've got 20% vacancy in a submarket, ideally you'd like to bring in tenants that are not already in that submarket. Instead of just poaching from your neighbor, you're securing new out-of-town tenants. The bigger, the better. Acadia Healthcare signed a 63,000 square foot lease at McEwen Northside East recently. Cool Springs' average asking rent is over $36 per square foot, which falls only behind downtown Nashville and Midtown for the highest rents in the area. So perhaps that is a reason for some of the higher vacancy. Cool Springs is a very expensive place to have office space. Quote, there's a lot of activity in the suburbs. Brentwood over the past year has been one of the tightest markets right next to Cool Springs, and it continues to have an enormous amount of activity. Cool Springs' vacancy rate remains high at over 20%, but it expects that number to fall during the year. Office vacancy in Brentwood is one of the lowest in the area, ending the first quarter at just 11%. So, what do we take away from this? A lot of folks don't realize that Brentwood is outperforming Cool Springs. So when we talk about the Brentwood office market, normally you're going to be thinking about the Maryland Farms area. Brentwood is outperforming Cool Springs. Cool Springs is having a moment right now attracting large out-of-town tenants, which is going to push down that 20% vacancy rate in the near term. So suburban office space is making a comeback after a few pretty difficult years for Williamson County. Williamson County was very, very hot for a long time. The last 2 years, those out-of-town tenants kind of put a pause on signing leases for large space. That seems to be correcting itself. Suburban office space is hot again. You heard it here first. Next, a massive new development downtown starts construction. Chicago-based Ridgeline Development Partners and Deep Cove Partners broke ground this week on what they call the Bend at Capitol District. So the Bend is going to have multiple uses all under this umbrella that they're calling the Bend. The development will include an 8-story Moxie hotel as well as a 10-story residential building. The residential building will include the Dell at the Bend, which means 128 fully furnished apartments by Marriott Bonvoy, and also the residences at the Bend, 133 for rent apartments. So you've got a 10-story residential building that's got 2 different brands in it. The Dell at the Bend, which is fully furnished, and the residences at the Bend, which is traditional for rent apartments. This project expected to be complete in early 2027, which is a very quick pace for a project of that size. Nashville has been good to us, as phase 1 of this project is now one of the highest performing town place suites in the United States. So 3 different elements to this downtown development. The first, which is already done, a town place suites, which has been one of the top performers in the country. Next is going to be a Moxie hotel. And then you've got the 10-story residential building that's going to be a combination of fully furnished apartments and traditional for rent apartments. So very cool project, a big project. Downtown needs some of these big projects to get going. You know, a lot of the big projects have been put on hold or canceled altogether. So it's good to see some of these high-profile projects actually moving forward. What is an indoor slide park? Slick City Action Park. Slick City Action Park, which bills itself as the world's first indoor slide and air court park. You've never heard that before. Indoor slide and air court park is opening in Mount Juliet in 2026. The family-friendly entertainment concept has more than 60 locations across the country, either open or signed up for. This will be the first location in Tennessee. The new 40,000 square foot venue will open at the intersection of Legacy Point Boulevard and Golden Bear Gateway near the Costco in Mount Juliet. Get this, each park features water-free slides. So just regular slides, no water, and other locations will feature go-karts and a trampoline sports court. So the air court park of the concept, I believe, refers to the trampoline sports court, and the indoor slide part, of course, refers to the water-free slides. In addition to those two things, You're also going to see some go-karts at some of these venues. So I love the idea of the trampoline sports court. I don't know if your children go to any of the local trampoline parks, but the most popular portion of those trampoline parks is usually the trampoline sports court, where you've got kids that are way too old to be out there pushing out the little kids who it was really meant for. So I'm kind of triggered by some of that behavior because my kids are younger and are age appropriate. And then you've got these middle school kids that are just dominating these courts, and their heads are about as tall as the basketball court, the basketball rims. So probably not the best athletes you've ever seen in your life dominating these trampoline sport courts instead of letting the little kids play. But maybe that's just me. Maybe we need to have a place for these middle school kids to go and act like they're good at sports by beating up on little kids on trampolines. But, maybe I'm just sensitive on that topic. Let's keep moving. Huge sublease huge sublease taken up by a co-working center. This maybe doesn't sound that unusual. It actually is pretty unusual in real life. I'm a former co-working center owner, and co-working centers are actually in the business of subleasing space, right? So if you own a co-working center, you're leasing a space at one price and then subleasing portions of that space to other tenants at a premium, and that's how you make your profit. It's not nearly as easy as it sounds, but that's essentially the business plan. Of course, in addition to subleasing a portion of that space, you're providing them with a suite of services. Asurion found a tenant to take over nearly 100,000 square feet of its Gulch headquarters. Asurion is subleasing 3 floors of its headquarters to WeWork, probably still the most name recognition for any co-working provider in the country. The co-working giant has subleased 98,100 square feet in the building on behalf of one company. That company, they just declined to disclose the identity. So, Asurion has a building built for them, which they agreed to lease, right? So you've got a developer that owns some land. They says, hey, Asurion, I'll build you a building to your specifications. You sign a long-term lease to occupy the building. Cool. Asurion gets into the building, paying rent. All of a sudden, business hits a tough patch, and they say, wow, we've got 100,000 square feet too much. We need to go to the market and sublease some of our space. They go to the market. We're subleasing it to WeWork, and WeWork already has a tenant lined up that they're going to sublease it to. So it's a double sublease. Asurion was vacating about 1/6 of its new headquarters less than a year after opening the Gulch office building. The building is the 8th largest office building with just over 551,000 square feet. Asurion will continue occupying 450,000 square feet of that custom-built facility for their business. While Asurion is downsizing its office space, WeWork is doubling down on Nashville. Yeah, okay. It shuttered its flagship location at downtown's One Nashville Place last year. So I'm not sure I'm calling it doubling down when you just shuttered your flagship location. Needless to say, the co-working company added 2 new bookable locations in the LNC Tower and UBS Tower in October. So they shut down their flagship location. They leased 2 other smaller locations, and now they've worked a deal here to take down about 100,000 square feet from Asurion. I will tell you, the owner of the founder of WeWork rather, Adam Newman is his name. His name's going to come up again in today's show. Back when I owned co-working centers, my biggest competition was WeWork, and it was real clear to me that WeWork was losing money. They were offering rents at their brand new, beautifully built out facilities that could not possibly turn a profit for the operator. And people didn't believe me. You know, a lot of people don't know anything about the co-working business. I was in the middle of it. I understood it. And I knew WeWork was a scam. They were losing money in renting office space at rates that ensured they continued losing money until they ultimately went bankrupt. They kicked out Adam Newman. It was a big to-do. This was years ago. Adam Newman has a new company called Flow. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. This is a person whose gift in life is raising money from other people, losing that money, and still coming out ahead himself. So he came out ahead after he was pushed out of WeWork. He's now operating another company, and I'm going to share with you how they were involved in that $46 million loss of a local apartment building. So this guy could not be less impressive, in my opinion, except for he is so gifted in raising money from other people, losing that money, but still taking his share with him. A new honky tonk is underway on Lower Broadway. Arizona-based Riot Hospitality is building a 5-story, 31,000 square foot venue at 201 Broadway, the site of downtown's record-setting property sale. So you may have remembered we covered this. A tiny little portion of a parking lot sold for a huge price, broke all records for Broadway land. They've now announced how they're going to use that land. 5 stories, over 31,000 square foot honky tonk. They're investing $35 million into the project, which I believe means into building out the building on top of the land cost. This is Riot Hospitality Group's 3rd location in Music City. The new venue will join Riot's Nashville portfolio of Hand Cut Nashville at 135 7th Avenue South and Dierks Bentley's Whiskey Row at 400 Broadway. Excuse me, I need a little caffeine there. Old Town Trolley Tours, which has operated on the site since 2016, will have a satellite ticket booth in the new building. Last summer, they paid $16.25 million for the 0.05 acre sliver of the downtown parking lot, making one of the highest prices ever paid for Nashville land. I don't know why they hedge their bets and say one of. That was the highest price ever paid for Nashville land. The purchase price was equivalent to around $7,461 per square foot. I will tell you, it is unheard of to sell dirt for more than $100 per square foot. You know, most dirt, even in like Williamson County, which is hot, if you can get $60 a square foot for dirt in Williamson County, that's a sky-high price. If you get over $100 per square foot in one of those really popular pockets in downtown Nashville, you're doing well. They paid $7,461 per square foot for the dirt on which to build a $35 million building. So, really well-capitalized developers with very large balls taking on a project like this. The investment firm previously set the old record when it bought the 2 neighboring parcels located at 203 and 205 Broadway for $15.25 million in 2022. That property spans just 0.06 acres, making the purchase price equivalent to 5,834 square feet, which set a record at that time. So they must really feel confident in the ability to print cash in a downtown honky-tonk, probably learning that lesson from the Dierks Bentley space, which I'm sure prints cash. If the building home to Lucky Bastard Saloon sells at its asking price of $58.2 million, the deal will set a new record with its per square foot price. That's not a land price, that's a building price. So if the Lucky Bastard Saloon sells for its ask, which it probably won't, but it might be in the range, that will also set a new record for per square foot on the building. So Lower Broadway, whether there might be a slowdown in the downtown core elsewhere, Lower Broadway still hot as lava. Pie Town Tower downsized. This is very on trend for what we're seeing in Nashville today. An Illinois developer has scrapped plans for a 25-story tower in Pie Town to pursue a smaller development. T2 Capital Management, which is a heavy hitter out of Chicago, real talented, real smart guys, is planning a 7-story short-term rental condo, retail, and restaurant development in the up-and-coming downtown neighborhood. So what's a short-term rental condo? This is a condo that anyone can buy, and then we'll have the built-in services that allow you to rent it out on a short-term basis for a profit. You see this all the time in South Florida, where you're paying huge prices for these condos, but you're offsetting your holding costs by renting it to people that are visiting on vacation while you are not, right? So you never really cover all of your costs when you do something like that. They try to convince you can buy this condo, rent it out, and live here for free when you want. That almost never happens, but you can offset some of your holding costs so you can use it when you want to use it at a lower cost than you otherwise would be able to having not rented it. So that's the concept there, along with some restaurant and retail space. In 2022, the firm pitched plans for a 25-story tower on the site with roughly 400 luxury apartment units. T2 Capital paid a collective $11.25 million for the 1.1-acre project site in 2022. Quote, "It was just the wrong time to go and capitalize a $200 million project." What that means is they weren't able to raise the money for a project of that magnitude. Developers all over Nashville are telling this same story. This has been the problem with our commercial real estate market for the last 3-4 years. It's access to financing. A lot of these developers, they not only need to raise the debt, which comes from a bank, but they also need to raise a portion of the equities. They go out and raise equity investment, and they go out and borrow debt, and then they put a little bit of their own money into the deal. Very, very difficult time to be a developer trying to raise capital. That's why they call it capital and not just debt, because there's equity capital and debt capital. Quote, "We still love Pie Town. We're still committed to the site. So we took a step back and reevaluated what we should do here." New project plans include 82 for sale condo units that offer short-term rental options and nearly 6,600 square feet of restaurant and retail space. So 82 condos in a, what did we say it was? 8-story building? Yes, 7 stories. So you're 7 stories. First story is going to be retail. You're going to have 6 stories of condos, which they can fit 82 for sale condos. Pie Town sits just east of the Gulch and south of the Korean Veterans Boulevard roundabout. The area has become a popular target for developers. Luxury British hotel brand The Hoxton announced it was opening its first Nashville location in Pie Town. A 32-story apartment tower called Ray Nashville broke ground in the area last year. So Pie Town has got a lot of interest, but interest isn't enough, right? You know, I was just talking to another broker last week, and I said, I love to have eager buyers for my deals, but that doesn't mean much if that eager buyer doesn't have an equally eager lender, right? So I think what you're seeing in some of these prime locations downtown is the buyers are more eager than their lenders are, and that's really causing some problems in our market today. Rivergate Mall is getting redeveloped, and we've got some of the details here for you. Mayor Freddie O'Connell and Maris, formerly known as El Nair, have reached an agreement on the redevelopment of Rivergate Mall. The redevelopment will include apartments, townhomes, senior housing, retail, restaurants, office, hotels, and more. So basically everything except self-storage is what they're saying. We can take the lessons we've learned from the global mall redevelopment in Antioch and the Bellevue Mall to revitalize another space that is no longer serving the community well, O'Connell said. As part of the deal, Maris has agreed to pay for part of the public infrastructure, reserve land for a WeGo transit facility, and include affordable senior housing in the development. The company is going to borrow $22 million to pay for the initial infrastructure. $22 million just for the initial infrastructure. What does that mean? That means rainwater management. That means bringing the utilities to the site. That means, all of the base building things that you need to have in place before you can actually put a shovel in the ground and start building the actual structure. So a lot of people that aren't in the real estate business underestimate how much these infrastructure costs are. I recently brought a building out of the ground for my own personal use, and I was really pretty shocked by how costly and difficult it was to get that initial infrastructure done so that you could actually bring the building out of the ground. So don't underestimate how much it costs for those things you don't see. The project is planning for a fall construction start this fall with a 2029 completion. The mall sits on 57 acres in Goodlettsville. 57 storefronts have closed in the past 5 years, leaving only 39 open. If that isn't the definition of a failing mall, I don't know what is. This has taken a long time to put together, but this is absolutely what should happen for the Rivergate area. I've spoken to some owners nearby, and they're very optimistic about rejuvenating that area and what it might do for surrounding property value. It's not going to happen quickly, but it is going to happen. And anytime you have a high profile project nearby, it's helpful. So when you're telling the upside story of that property and how that area is on an upward trajectory, a big project like that nearby tells that story for you. So it is very useful, even if you are looking to sell before a project like that actually even gets started or is completed. It's helpful in the story that you tell buyers. Okay, we've got 4 more for you here. What is Nateland? Top-selling comedian Nate Bargatze is serious about building a theme park in Nashville. Nateland is in the market and analytics phase, he said, for a project that would be located on the former Opryland USA theme park site. I'll be honest with you, I bet we're closer than people think, Bargatze said, but it's still a little bit of a ways off. The concept is something similar to what you see at Universal Studios. I kind of would like that to be Nateland. We can have rides and start making movies there. So movie studio / amusement park is what he's got planned. He said, now everything I do is about moving Nateland, the company, forward. The 46-year-old comedian is known for his clean stand-up and is supposedly the #1 earning comedian worldwide. I don't believe that, but that means he's making a lot of money. Calling him the #1 earning comedian worldwide seems like a big stretch, but nevertheless, my man is rich and he's doing it by clean comedy. And clearly he's a local guy and he's got very ambitious plans for a Nashville-like Universal Studios, which would be very, very cool. That's going to be a very, very, very heavy lift, but I do wish him well. A $46 million loss on a Midtown apartment tower. How can that be? Midtown is hot. How can you lose $46 million in Midtown? Tishman Speyer paid $112 million for the 2010 West End Avenue Tower. The 25-story tower offers apartments as well as ground-level retail. The seller, Flow Global Holdings, an apartment startup launched by WeWork founder Adam Neumann. My man Adam Neumann has found every way possible to lose money for his investors, including losing $46 million on a midtown apartment tower, an area that is just booming. Unbelievable. The entity paid $158 million for the building in December 2021. At the time, the sale nearly broke the Nashville record for price per unit. The high-rise offers 358 units, which makes the transaction equivalent to around $312,000 per apartment. They overpaid, then they didn't manage it well, and then the cash flow by which you price a property like this, right? So if you've got an apartment building, its value is derived by the cash flow that it generates, right? So they must have had some debt that they couldn't replace and were forced to sell. And if you're forced to sell, you're forced to sell at today's value. So if you overpaid and then ran the building into the ground from a cash flow perspective, that's how you result in a $46 million loss for a almost new midtown apartment tower. Congratulations to Adam Newman. His streak continues. He's very, very active in the South Florida market right now, whereby he's trying to build apartment complexes that are communities, right? This idea that they're going to make them some type of special community and do special things in addition to providing you with apartments. That's basically the concept of flow. I would stay so far away from him, it's not even funny. Christie's Cookies Germantown to be redeveloped. The Germantown site, formerly to Christie Cookies headquarters, sold, marking the official exit of the longtime local cookie brand. Nashville-based Trimark Builders paid $13 million for the property. They are planning to redevelop the site with more than 40 townhomes and retail space. I think that's pretty interesting, really. You paid $13 million for the dirt in order to build 40 townhomes. Those are going to be very, very expensive townhomes. Unless there's going to be a substantial retail space portion, we don't know the size of the retail space. But when I hear $13 million for 40 townhomes, I'm thinking, wow, that is a very, very expensive piece of dirt to build townhomes. They're planning. They borrowed an additional $35 million for a construction loan from Old National Bank. So not even including the cash they've got in the deal for the construction piece, they've got $13 million in the dirt with a $35 million construction loan. Not even including the cash they're putting in, we're talking about $48 million to create 40 townhomes with some retail space. The site had been on the market for $17 million. It traded for $13 million, quite a discount. Christie Cookie Company is relocating its operations outside of Nashville after a 40-year run. This month, the company closed its 12 South retail spot as well. New York-based Rich Products acquired the cooking company in 2019 and is consolidating production of Christie Cookie products across their national manufacturing network. The seller of this $13 million parcel was not Christie Cookie, they were a tenant. The seller paid $490,000 for the 4-parcel property in 1999. You buy it in 1999 for $490,000, you rent it for 25 years, and you flip it for $13 million. That's how the average person can get rich. As long as you can see and have access to the money to get into some of these well-located properties and obviously have the skills to hold them for a number of years. $490,000 to $13 million, not even including the rent that was received over that 25 years. Nolensville, last story of the day. Nolensville is one of the fastest growing towns in the country. The ranking by percentage of population changed between 2014 and 2023. Nolensville comes in at number 10 in the country, growing its population 137% from 2014 to 2023. Home prices in the city have also skyrocketed, increasing 120%, which is actually below the rate of population growth, to an average price of $808,000. Nashville-based Southern Land Company is targeting Nolensville for its first local master plan community since it developed West Haven in 2001. The 362-acre neighborhood will add 735 homes to the city, and I can tell you they will all be priced above $808,000. Spring Hill comes in at number 57 on the national list, growing 70% since 2014. Homes in Spring Hill cost $507,000 on average. Spring Hill will soon be home to Nashville's latest gated golf club community called Firefly, which sits on 700 acres and will add 407 homes and 2 golf courses. Nashville itself has seen considerable growth during that time. The population has increased 10% since 2014. So Nolensville substantially outpacing Nashville, 137% to 10% in the same period. Overall, Texas leads the nation in population growth from that time. Those are the stories we have for you today, handpicked for the ones that we thought were informative and help tell the story of what's happening today in Nashville. Again, we are brought to you by Beechwood Commercial Real Estate Brokerage, your broker if you are a seller of commercial property in Nashville or the Southeast. We appreciate you tuning into the podcast this week. We hope we brought you a little bit of value. If there's anything we can do for you regarding listing and selling your commercial real estate, or if you have any questions related to the commercial real estate business in general, I encourage you to reach out to me or anyone in our office, and we'd be happy to help. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.